There's a particular silence that falls in a workshop when a car comes in and the mechanic already knows the bill is going to be worth more than the car. I've had to have that conversation more times than I'd like. Someone's bought a tidy-looking family motor, full service history, drives beautifully, and I have to stand there and explain that the engine has quietly eaten itself from the inside and the repair costs more than they paid. Here's what most buyers never understand. It isn't how often a car goes wrong that ruins you. It's how it's been built to be repaired. Some cars are designed so that a small failure is a small bill. Others are designed so that a small failure means the engine comes out, and that is the difference between an annoying week and a financial disaster. So today, 17 cars the trade quietly warns people about, and the specific design decisions that make them so brutal to fix. I'm Roy Stroud. I'm 45 and I've spent 22 years as an independent mechanic here in the Midlands. No dealership badge on my overalls, and nobody paying me to name a single one of these. Hit subscribe before we start, because this could genuinely stop a mate signing for one of these on finance next weekend. Right, let's count them down. A quick word on how I've done this, because I'm not going to make numbers up, and you shouldn't trust anyone who does. Where there's hard evidence, I'll tell you exactly what it is. The what car, reliability survey, the which, car survey, warranty claim data, and documented manufacturer compensation and warranty extension schemes. Where it's trade experience and owner reports rather than published data, I'll say that too. And I'll be fair to every car on this list, because every one of them has owners who've had no bother at all. Here we go, from 17 down to 1. Number 17, the Fiat 500X. Charming thing to look at, and that's genuinely most of its appeal. The trade's worry isn't that it's catastrophically unreliable, it's the ownership experience around it. Parts supply and dealer support for Fiat in this country have thinned out considerably, and that turns a routine job into a car sitting on a ramp for weeks waiting on a component. A repair that's simple on a Golf becomes an ordeal here. It's not the fault that hurts, it's the weight. Number 16. The Citroën C4 Picasso and Grand C4 in older automated manual form. Lovely family car, genuinely clever packaging. But that automated manual gearbox is one the trade has never loved, because when the clutch actuator side of it starts playing up, you get jerky, unpredictable shifting. And a repair that isn't cheap on a car that isn't worth much. Add the diesel particulate filter troubles that come from short city journeys, and you've got an MPV that can cost more to keep than it costs to buy. Number 15, the BMW X1 in older 4-cylinder form. Lovely to drive, well built inside, and I'd not talk anyone out of one lightly. But BMW's 4-cylinder timing chain reputation is well earned in the trade, and here's the thing that matters. On these engines, it's not a quick job. You get a rattle on cold start, that's your warning, and by the time you hear it, the clock is already running. It's a proper strip down, and the labour is what gets you. Add run flat tyres that can't be repaired and cost a premium to replace, and it's an expensive car to simply keep on the road. Number 14, the Alfa Romeo Giulia. And I want to be honest, because I love these. It's one of the best driving saloons of its generation, and I'd have one myself if I were braver. But even Alfa specialists will tell you to lease rather than buy, and the reason is electrical. Owners consistently report sensors throwing false readings, infotainment misbehaving, and small electrical gremlins that are maddening to chase. And chasing electrical faults is billed by the hour. It's a heart-overhead car. Just go in knowing which one you're using. Number 13, the Jeep Compass. Rugged looks, and that's what sells it in this country. But it doesn't have the reliability record or the dealer network to back that image up here, and the trade's experience is of build quality and trim issues alongside the mechanical ones. When it's the four-wheel drive hardware or the gearbox that goes, the bills are serious on a car that depreciates hard. You're paying SUV money for something that isn't backed up like one. Number 12, the Volkswagen T-Roc. Popular, well made in most respects, and I understand exactly why people buy them. Two things put it here. The dual-clutch DSG gearbox, when the mechatronic unit inside it fails, is a big money repair rather than a small one, and it's a known weak point in the trade. And VW's small turbo petrol engines have a history of oil consumption complaints that owners find very hard to get taken seriously until damage is done. Brilliant when they're right, expensive when they're not. Number 11, the Mercedes A-Class in 1.3-litre form. Now, this engine is jointly developed with Renault, and it turns up in several cars on this list, which tells you something in itself. The complaints the trade hears about are the same wherever it's fitted, and the sting is that you're paying Mercedes prices for the repair. Pair it with a dual-clutch gearbox that can shudder, and you have a premium badge on a car that doesn't repair like a premium car. Reputation is doing an awful lot of work here. Number 10, the Ford Kuga plug-in hybrid, and this one has documented history behind it, not just workshop gossip. This model was subject to a significant recall over a battery fire risk, which is about as serious as a recall gets, and if you're looking at a used one, your first job is to confirm that work was actually completed. Beyond that, the fundamental problem with any older plug-in hybrid is the battery pack, because a failing pack out of warranty is a 5-figure conversation on a car worth a fraction of that. Check the recall history and check the battery health, or walk away. Number 9, the Nissan Qashqai in its more complicated hybrid forms. The regular ones are decent, and I want to say that plainly, but the more electrified versions stack complexity on complexity, and every extra system is another expensive module that can fail once the warranty's gone. Nissan sits low in the reliability tables generally now, and the trade's concern with these is simple. Nobody yet knows what a 10-year-old high-mileage one costs to keep going, and you don't want to be the person who finds out. Quick favour before the top 8, because this is where the genuinely ruinous ones start. If this is saving you from a 5-figure mistake, tap the like button, it costs you nothing, and it helps this reach someone about to sign for one. Cheers. Right, and now we get to the engines that eat themselves. Number 8, the Renault Captur with the 1.3 turbo petrol. Perfectly pleasant small crossover. But this engine family uses what's called a wet timing belt, a belt that runs inside the engine, submerged in the oil, and I'm going to explain properly why that matters, because the next few entries all share it. Add the dual-clutch automatic, which the trade sees fail expensively on these, and it's a cheap car that isn't cheap to own. Number 7, the Vauxhall Crossland, and now we're into the big one, because this is where the documented evidence is overwhelming. This car uses the Stellantis PureTech petrol engine, and the wet belt inside it is one of the defining mechanical scandals of the last decade in this country. Here's what actually happens. The belt sits in the oil, and over time it degrades. As it does, tiny particles break off it and circulate in the oil, and those particles block the oil pickup. Once the oil can't circulate, the engine destroys itself, and by the time you notice anything is wrong, it's usually far too late. That's not a repair, that's an engine. Number 6, the Peugeot 208 with the same PureTech engine, and here's the proof this isn't the trade being dramatic. Stellantis themselves have extended the warranty on previous generation 1.0 and 1. 2 PureTech engines covering 100% of parts and labour for up to 10 years or 112,000 miles under conditions. And they've gone further. There is now a compensation portal open to UK customers, covering costs from excessive oil consumption or premature timing belt failure incurred between January 2022 and December 2024 on Citroën DS, Vauxhall and Peugeot models with those engines. Manufacturers do not open compensation portals for problems that don't exist. So if you own one of these and you've had that work done, go and look at that portal, because you may be owed money. And if you're buying, the crucial detail is that later versions of this engine move to a chain instead of a belt, so check very carefully which one you're looking at. Same car, same badge, completely different risk. Number 5, and I'll be even-handed here, the Ford 1.0 EcoBoost in its wet belt years, which covers a lot of very popular cars. Same fundamental design, same failure mode, particles from a degrading belt starving the engine of oil. The difference is that Ford's response in this country has been far more piecemeal than Stellantis's, with no equivalent blanket compensation scheme. So the design risk is comparable and the safety net is thinner. If you're looking at one, get the belt history in writing and treat a car with no evidence of that work as a car with a bill attached. Number 4, the Range Rover Evoque, particularly the older ones. Lovely thing, brilliantly styled, and Land Rover deserve real credit for the fact that their newer cars are measurably better. But the older Evoque is a car the trade sees again and again, and the which? Survey found the Evoque plug-in hybrid to be its least loved car of the year, with owners reporting it spent on average around 3 weeks off the road when it went wrong, and one owner waiting more than 10 months for parts. And on top of the mechanical side, there's water ingress, blocked sunroof drains, and door seals letting damp into a car absolutely full of electronics. And corroded electronics are a nightmare to diagnose and a fortune to fix. Number 3, the Jaguar E-Pace, and this is where the design decision I mentioned at the very start really bites. The engine family in these has a timing chain reputation in the trade, and the killer detail is where that chain lives. It's at the back of the engine against the bulkhead, which means to get at it, the engine comes out. Before a single part is fitted, you're paying for hours and hours of labour just for access, and if the chain has already let go and damaged valves, you're not repairing an engine anymore, you're buying one. That is the single clearest example on this whole list of a car where a modest component failure has been engineered into a catastrophic bill. Number 2, the Mercedes GLA with the 1.3 engine. Everything I said about the A-Class applies, but worse because you've paid more for it. You've got the Renault-developed engine, the dual-clutch gearbox that can shudder and fail expensively, the four-wheel drive hardware adding yet more to go wrong, and a badge that makes every single one of those repairs cost more than it would on anything else. This is the worst of both worlds. Mainstream engineering underneath, premium pricing on the invoice. People buy the star on the bonnet expecting it to buy them peace of mind. On this one, it buys them a bigger bill. And number 1, the car the trade would most like to save you from. The Range Rover, and the Velar in particular. Let me be completely fair first, because it deserves it. It is a genuinely magnificent thing. Beautiful, superbly capable, one of the most desirable cars on any driveway in Britain. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous, because it gets cheap fast and people see a bargain. Warranty-wise, who track actual repair claims on used cars, have rated the Range Rover the least reliable used car you can buy. Now stack up why. You've got the engine family we just discussed on the E-Pace, with the same chain-at-the-back architecture and the same engine-out labour bill. You've got air suspension, which gives it that magic carpet ride and is the single most expensive thing on the car to fix, because the air springs perish, the compressor burns out trying to keep up, and it's rarely just one part. You've got an electrical architecture with dozens of modules, any one of which can throw a fault that takes specialist diagnosis to trace. And you've got water ingress on top of all of it. Any one of those on its own would put a car on this list. This has all 4 at once in a vehicle that's shed most of its value, which means you can very easily face a repair worth more than the car is. That's my number 1, and it isn't close. So let's run them back quickly. 17. The Fiat 500X, parts and support. 16. The C4 Picasso and its automated manual. 15. The BMW X1 and that chain job. 14. The Alfa Giulia, heart overhead. 13. The Jeep Compass. 12. The VW T-Roc and its DSG. 11. The Mercedes A-Class 1.3. 10. The Kuga plug-in hybrid, check that recall. 9. The complicated Qashqai hybrids. 8. The Renault Captur and its wet belt. 7. The Vauxhall Crossland. 6. The Peugeot 208, and go and check that compensation portal. 5. The Ford EcoBoost wet belt years. 4. The older Evoque. 3. The Jaguar E-Pace and its engine-out chain. 2. The Mercedes GLA. And number 1, the Range Rover Velar. Now, my honest word to finish on. Not one of these cars is evil, and I mean that. Every single one has owners who've done 100,000 happy miles and think I'm talking rubbish, and they're not wrong about their car. What puts a vehicle on this list isn't certainty, it's odds, and specifically the odds that a fault becomes a catastrophe rather than an inconvenience. And notice the thread running through the whole thing. Nearly every worst case here comes down to the same 2 design decisions. A critical component put somewhere that needs the engine removed to reach it, or a part that fails in a way that destroys everything around it before you get any warning. That's not bad luck. That's a design choice, and it's the thing to ask about before you buy anything. If your heart's set on one, fine. Go in with your eyes open. Get an independent inspection. Get the service history in writing. Find out exactly which engine version you're looking at. Budget properly for a big repair, and think hard about a decent warranty. And if you'd rather simply avoid the whole business, the trade's boring answers haven't changed, and they sit at the top of the same surveys every year for a reason. So I want to hear from you. Which of these have you owned, and did it behave itself or bleed you dry? And has anyone here actually claimed on that PureTech compensation portal? Because I'd love to know how you got on. Drop it in the comments, because someone reading this is about to sign for one of these, and your experience might be the thing that stops them. If this was useful, hit like, subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you in the next one. Look after it, and it'll look after you. This video is based on publicly available reliability surveys, owner satisfaction data, warranty claim information, published recall notices, and documented manufacturer warranty and compensation schemes current at the time of recording, together with independent workshop experience. Individual vehicles vary enormously, and a well-maintained example of any model here can prove perfectly reliable. Some models have had later updates, revised components, or improvements. Always obtain current information, check a vehicle's recall and service history, and get an independent inspection before making any purchase decision.